Alright, so we're going to try a little bit more at being in time today, and I thought it might be good to focus on a couple of sections, and I'm going to really focus my attention today on sections 31, 32, and 33, which deal with Heidegger's notion of understanding and how understanding relates to interpretation and then how those relate to what he means by a statement. For Heidegger, understanding is the ability to project possibilities, and understanding is, in a lot of ways, a futural word. That is, you understand something by being able to project possibilities upon it, and as it is made relevant to a larger totality and it's serviceable, and we're talking about non-docile beings, and those we understand in terms of what he calls the hermeneutical as. Now, there's two kinds of as structure, right? That is, what do beings show themselves as? And the hermeneutical as and the apophantical as. Now, the hermeneutical as is really the entity as tool or utensil, whereas the apophantical as is the object as predicated substance there before us. What Heidegger is going to suggest here is that the statement, in particular the predicative assertion, is a derivative mode of discourse, that there's lots of discourse that is more akin to an operative hermeneutical as. It's an understanding that has a foresight that's non-thematically installed just in the world in terms of practical engagements and involvements. It's not a theoretical posture. It's the way that one, in what's sometimes called mindless everyday coping. I mean, there's a way that maybe Hubert Dreyfus would talk about it. But it's this practical understanding that we have by way of using language in non-theoretic or assertive manners. Now, this would be very different than the changeover that goes on from the hermeneutical as into the apophantical as. And it's sort of like what happens is in the moment of breakdown, the understanding changes from encountering an item in terms of its relevance to a totality, and it's an equipmental totality. It's a sense of, again, of a with which, of a for the sake of which, and an in order to. It's these kinds of relational structures that are practical, which are part of the hermeneutical as. The apophantical as would be the way that the object now becomes available to us in terms of its properties or the substances that it could be said to be composed of. I think one of the more radical claims that goes on in here that maybe is worth really thinking about is that for Heidegger, it's that understanding is prior to interpretation. See, I think we think of it like this, and I could be wrong, but my sense of it is that most people think of it as you don't really understand anything, and then you encounter something, and then you interpret it, and after you interpreted it, you come to an understanding. And it's almost the opposite for Heidegger. For Heidegger, because you're thrown, and by the time you come to yourself, you're already sort of, I guess, in a situation and with a historicity, and you come to yourself in such a way that the understanding is always there in the backdrop, and then the interpretation is the way that the understanding develops itself. Right? So there's an understanding, and then again, interpretation furthers out what was already understood. I mean, this is how Gadamer ends up developing his whole hermeneutical project out of reading Heidegger. He starts to realize that much of what we call interpretation is a chasing out of other possibilities that were neglected earlier on. And maybe I'll give you just a real quick sentence here, and this is, and again, I'm just looking at these sections right there, but this is I'm on the Stanbaum translation, and this is on page 142 toward the bottom. Wonderful statement here. Heidegger, this is written, Every interpretation which is to contribute some understanding must already have understood what is to be interpreted. Yeah, exactly. See, now, and again, he then addresses is this problem of, does it become a vicious circle? Does that mean that I'm simply circling around, unable to break out of it? Well, the problem is the right way to come into it. That is, there's no way to get out of the hermeneutical circle. The problem is, how can we recover a self-understanding in terms of the throw that we have had, and it's through the interpretation. But this is why I think, again, death becomes so important for Heidegger, because death becomes that principle of individuation where, more than trying to predicate myself as a substance, more than trying to say, here's the matter that I'm made up of, and here's my mass, and here are the different genomic sequences that make up my being, it throws us into a questioning about the historical embedded practices that sanction and legitimate our lives, that give meaning to our lives. It has to do with the who one is, and the question of who one is, and can one recover the possibility of that question from the historical circumstances in which one always has already found oneself. Okay, so thank you.